Good evening, everybody. My name is Shannon Rose McAuliffe, and I'm glad to welcome you here to another 15K Creative Arts Competition workshop. This evening, we're going to be focusing on for-profit ventures and business plans with Carly Chase. I'm joined by Theo Fields. Say hello, Theo.
Hi, everyone.
We've got some conversation that we're going to have. Carly's going to share a lot of her wealth of intelligence with us. We'll have some Q&A. So, without further ado, Carly, do you want to do a quick introduction and then launch right in?
Absolutely. Yeah, that is part of my
Perfect.
plan. So let me just share my slides. And I know that this is being recorded and I assume will be heard by others potentially, but just so we give those of us who are on the call the most benefit, Diana and Saida, tell me if I just pronounced your name wrong or if I completely butchered it. Is it Saida or Sita?
Sita. No worries.
Sita, okay. I took a 50-50 chance and I, of course, was on the wrong side of that. I want to make sure this is as useful for you guys as possible. So, if you want to give me any context about what you're working on, so I can sort of tailor this to that, and then we can sort of talk through specific things in regards to your own businesses. I would love to do that. If you guys just want to sit back and listen, no pressure. So maybe I can't see your faces and that's totally fine, but do you guys want to talk about your business? Do you want not talk about your business? Maybe just give me an idea before we jump in.
Sure, I'm happy to give you my 30-second pitch, but I also recognize other folks might view this video later, so definitely don't tailor everything to our ideas. So I'm working on an idea that so far I'm calling Fused, exact name TBD, and also going to be part of Muse. It's going to be part of the Fuse program over IAP.
Awesome, congrats.
Thank you. So I'm excited to work on it over IAP. And the need that I'm trying to solve is that art supplies today is really, really expensive and primarily purchased through brick and mortar stores. And there's no good places online to buy anything. And for artists who are aspiring to do stuff, for aspiring artists, it's actually really hard to get started. So my idea right now is to create a digitally native art supply purchasing experience that can help aspiring artists get started.
That's awesome. Cool. And do you have a team that you're working on this with?
I don't have a team, unfortunately, but I am looking for folks.
This is going to be tailored actually well to you then. So this is good.
Perfect.
And Diana, do you want to give us a shout or are you just going to hang with us?
Well, I just knew a few things about this program, but my intention is to learn more something that can help me in the future, because I want to be an ACT of the MIT Art, Culture and Technology candidate for a master.
Cool.
So that's why I wanted to know more and be more involved in the programs that MIT has. So.
Awesome. Good. All right, cool. Okay. So we'll get started then. So my name is Carly. I think that whenever you're listening to a presentation, you should get context for where all of this is coming from. There's no hard and fast rules in entrepreneurship, and there is no single framework. So therefore, everything, in my opinion, is an opinion that you're going to hear from anybody in entrepreneurship. It's just based on their own experiences. And the range of experiences of entrepreneurs is really vast. And so the context and to basically contextualize what I'm going to tell you today, of course, is based on my own experience. So I want to give you sort of the full context on me. So I started my career at Goldman Sachs in finance. I lived through the 2008 financial crisis there, stayed a number of years after that, and then decided that, the corporate world, which I thought was going to be my entire career, that I was going to try something else on, that maybe this wasn't going to be the most fun place for the rest of my career. And decided to go join the local government in New York City, where I actually live and still live today. I'm in Brooklyn right now. So I worked for Mayor Michael Bloomberg's administration in economic development. And back then, this was about 8 years ago, New York was trying to figure out how to compete after the financial crisis, how to diversify our economy. And one way was to bring more startups to New York. So we were trying to figure out how do we compete with San Francisco and London and Boston, and make New York more attractive for founders. the arts was a huge, obviously, existing industry in New York, for instance. So we said, what are the assets that we already have? And how can we get more entrepreneurs to feel confident that New York is a great place to not only start, but be able to grow their business. So I worked with a lot of founders, sort of figured out what the perceived and real challenges were with coming to New York. And that's really how I sort of got my startup bug. So then I decided to really try out startups and was hired as the general manager of a real estate tech startup, another industry, obviously, that's enormous in New York. Real estate, and basically was the founder of the New York office for a real estate marketplace called Pivot Desk. I did that for a number of years until we were sold to a national co-working provider called Industrious, and then since have been with in either a full-time or consulting capacity, and now I advise a couple of early stage startups, a number of venture-backed startups, and also have my own non-venture-backed startup, which is another option for people who are starting their own business. You don't always have to do the full venture-backed, crazy accelerated growth business model called Crab Walk, which is all about helping people get ownership over their careers and this new, I'd say, way of work where, I thought, like I already mentioned, I was at Goldman Sachs. I thought I was going to be there and go up a ladder. There is no ladder anymore, so people need a lot more help in navigating their careers. And in between that all, I found myself here at MIT, where I have been for about 3.5 years an entrepreneur in residence at the Trust Center, running a number of our extracurricular programs, including our accelerator program, Delta V, and our Intro to Entrepreneurship Bootcamp, Start MIT. I also am a senior lecturer for 2 classes, and as an EIR, get to coach a bunch of students, which is a ton of fun. So since we're going to be talking about business plans, I will tell you that I've had the privilege of seeing so many business plans at this point, both from early in my career and now, of course, at MIT, talking to lots of different students who work on lots of different industries and problems. And, if you guys could sort of tell me, or for anybody who wants to respond, I'm just sort of curious what you hear by a business plan, because I feel like this is a really big topic. There's business plan competitions, there's business plan submissions, there's financial projections. I'm just sort of curious any perceptions that people have about, like, what is this business plan thing anyways?
I can share what I tend to think of it as.
Yeah.
It's your go forward plan for how you intend to make revenue through what streams, how you intend to be a viable business, and not only viable at point of launch, but also sustainable going forward.
Yeah, I really like that. So I agree that a lot of business plans are, when I think of business plan, I also put it adjacent to money, and I put it adjacent to profits and profitability. And the thing about a business is that is the ultimate goal. You do not have a business unless you have paying customers. That is a core rule of ours at the Trust Center. But I really think about the business plan as helpful in a lot of ways. And so that's really right. That's kind of the end goal. And what Sita really hit on the head is we need a direction, right? Like a lot of times in entrepreneurship, things are going so fast and you just want to, get to the next goal and the next milestone and the next milestone. But if you don't actually have a direction, if you don't know where you're going in the long run, you're going to miss a lot of stuff, right? And you're going to sort of, your vision will probably actually narrow down smaller to what it really could be if you took a moment to sort of look around and understand the full picture and set a direction yourself. So I really love this quote that Brad Feld, who's actually happens to be an MIT grad and is a really prominent and famous venture capitalist that I have a lot of respect for. And he says it's a critical document for an entrepreneur to organize their thoughts around their new business. And this is what I think is really critical. So if I think, Sita, you really hit the nail on the head in terms of what the ultimate goal is. It is to get revenue and to create a sustainable business, because without customers and revenue, there is no sustainable business. But I really think, and I really love this phrasing, that a business plan is an opportunity for you to really organize your thoughts. And to me, one of the biggest goals or reasons why you'd want to organize your thoughts is so you can communicate them. Because really your job as an entrepreneur at the end of the day is to set a vision and communicate your vision, right? That's so you can raise money from investors. It's so you can find teammates and build, have co-founders and eventually employees. It's so you can talk to partners and customers. Really having a way to organize your thoughts so you can communicate them out is really, really key. And frankly, it's something that I really see as undervalued in most entrepreneurs. They just sort of think, you know, the product is the important thing to refine, and I'll just sort of wing my messaging or the way I pitch. And that is really, I would almost say, the opposite, right? Good product is it's a must-have. You don't really have a business if you don't have something exciting to sell. But if you can't communicate that out, it really doesn't matter in the first place.
And just piggybacking off of that,
Yeah,
that's one
please.
of the elemental aspects of the 15K specifically. I think that it's necessary to have sort of bedrock business fundamentals, but especially in the arts, we don't have as many quantitative measures to sort of be able to convey in a slide. And I think that while pitches are really important, I think that we really emphasize and value a really clear, communicative, persuasive, and engaging pitch, maybe above other almost anything else.
Yeah, totally. And so, you know, these are a few reasons that I sort of came up to sort of give you a whole set of reasons as to why you do a business plan. But I would actually sort of move your eyes to the third one in the middle of this slide, because this is really how I think about a business plan. It's like this master document you have that helps you. It's your business plan, this version of your business plan, at least. You're going to have lots of versions of your business plan depending on who the audience is. And we can talk about sort of what the different audiences you'll need it for. I just mentioned a few. But think of this plan that I'm talking about today as like your master document. That's an internal document that's just for you. It's a living document that you're going to update all the time and iterate on, so that you can pull from it when you're talking to a specific audience. So, you know, okay, here's my master plan. It has, you know, 15 different sections. When I'm talking to an investor versus a customer, I'm going to need to pull different sections and insights from it, right? Not everybody should see everything about your business. And you should be really thoughtful, and you'll learn how to do that over time about what to share and frankly, what not to share. And that's a whole other different communication skill set that we could talk about at a different time. And so I would argue, I think a lot of business plans are talked about in PowerPoint or even Excel when you think about sort of like financial projections. I would argue, unless you love PowerPoint, and some people do, I personally don't. This is even Keynote, a better version of PowerPoint in my opinion that I use today. But I really like text, especially when we're talking communication. I think it's so important to be able to write succinctly and compellingly in text, right? Because that's how we communicate. We talk on the phone, we write emails, we write proposals, and PowerPoint is one way to communicate. But in my head, it's not the world's best way to sort of get out all of your thoughts. It could be like sort of the high level version of your thoughts, and you can take that master text and translate it into PowerPoint for different audiences. But again, my 2 cents, my personal opinion, my personal experience, I don't necessarily think PowerPoint is the way to communicate your business plan. So again, we talked about this a little before, but who is a business plan for? I just put a scenario out here, and for Sita, you could even say just one co-founder now. You know, say you're 2 co-founders, you started working together in September at the beginning of the school year, and you want to recruit other team members and enter competitions soon. You know, maybe you've done some primary market research, you've begun to prototype. So, you know, we need a master document. So, you know, we're 2 co-founders, or I'm one person that works by myself, or, you know, maybe I'm, you know, a typical scenario is somebody, you know, maybe like a professor or a PI and 2 students working to commercialize research. And, you know, what this document can do for you as co-founders or team members, or for a single person who's working on their business, this is just an opportunity to coalesce your thoughts and to write down everything that's happening today, right? It's just it's a what's happened up to now document, and where do I want to go from here? And again, you're going to iterate this and iterate and iterate and refine it depending on the audience you're talking to. But, you know, this is almost one of the first things you should do in your business, in my opinion, because especially when you have multiple people involved, this is also a great document if you do have a co-founder or you do have team members, to also make sure you guys are on the same page, right? It's really easy to sort of assume that you're going in the same direction, but you know, if you don't actually check in and confirm that, you could easily be diverging. And so the earlier in your venture you can do this, the more aligned you're going to be in the long run. So when we think about what should be in my business plan, and this is going to be a really long slide that we can talk to, and we can sort of talk to whatever people want to talk about. But, you know, these are suggestions, right? These are what I've seen in business plans, and you might be able to fill in all of these sections today, and you might not be able to, right? And I think as much as you need to sort of understand and comprehend what you currently have, it's also an opportunity to figure out, what don't I have? What haven't I thought about? Or what haven't I figured out yet? Or, you know, what am I less confident in? And again, right, the benefit of putting this in text is you can also use this document to get feedback. One thing that entrepreneurs need to be good at is asking for help, right? And so not only asking for help, like, you know, I'm really bad at creating a vision, that's something that scares me. I'm really good at sort of saying in the near term what I want, but what could that be in the long term? Or, you know, I'm less great at understanding unit economics. Can I get some feedback on this? You know, this business plan hopefully empowers you to go and get the advice and the support you need. And also to be able to check in and say, you know, this makes sense to me. Does this make sense to somebody else? And that sort of overarching goal of communication. And again, this is just a list of suggestions that you should absolutely customize to your business and your stage of business. You know, if you're that scenario that I just put before this, it's probably pretty hard to have financial projections at this point, and that's totally okay. Just leave that open and know that every time you get a clue for that section, just add it back in. Okay, so just to sort of go through these really quick, I'm just gonna switch where my Zoom is so I can see every single bullet. So starting with your mission statement, and your vision statement. And I think there's a big question sometimes about the difference between these two. To me, a vision is really the direction you want to go in long term. You know, maybe has nothing to do with the way you're going to go to market or your first customer. It's really, how do I see this business having impact in the long run? You know, what is the ultimate goal of this business? And the mission statement is really close to that, but that's almost, you know, why am I doing this? Or why are we doing this as a team? You know, why is this important in the world or in my industry or to my customer? So vision, where the direction you want to go, and mission, I would say why this is important. The next most important thing, what is the problem you're solving? So important to be able to succinctly state. This is actually sometimes one of the hardest things to do, because, you know, you start with a problem, and then you decide to go talk to a bunch of customers, and then you sort of pivot to, you know, from where you started to more of what you're hearing in the customers and back again. A lot of times, you know, all of the different customer research we do and market research we do creates like a maze in our heads as entrepreneurs. I don't know if that's making sense and resonating with folks. It typically does when I'm teaching to my students. And again, taking an opportunity to really try to write out the problem you're solving. It might sound trivial, but it's actually, in my opinion, one of the hardest parts of the business plan. Then you want to talk about all of the market research you've done. So, you know, I've talked to these many customers or prospective customers. I've researched the market landscape. I understand the history of the problem I'm trying to solve. I understand the context I'm trying to operate in. I understand, you know, those who are currently trying to solve this problem. Here's who's tried it in the past and why they failed. And then you go on to, you know, your solution. Here is the solution to the problem I'm solving. Here is, you know, if it's a product that you've prototyped so far, or have product specs or a product brochure, you can put that in. Here is the way I'm going to develop this product over time. You know, that'll get to eventually the resources that you need to create this company. And then, you know, here's how I'm actually going to put this into market. This is how I'm going to get started. You know, here's the first customer I started with. If you guys are familiar with the concepts of beachhead market and persona, you know, who is my primary customer and how am I going to reach them? Am I going to do traditional, you know, is it a consumer product? Do I have to do traditional digital marketing? Is it a B2B product? Am I going to have a direct sales process? Is it a medical device? Am I going to have licensing agreements with existing distribution partners? You know, what's your idea for how you get started here? And then of course, I think, I know that Shannon said you guys are going to have a workshop on value propositions. I think another such an important piece of communication for your business, really to understand the value that you're delivering, especially for this primary customer. And then eventually, I do think, you know, business model, unit economics, financial projections, those probably come a little bit later just because you do need some information to really understand the world you're operating in. You might have some initial assumptions. That is great to include. And then the team. The team is a really important part of your business plan. You know, who is working on this? What are your skill sets? What is your existing experience? Why are you interested in this? And perhaps you might even have a couple of blank people, right? People you need to find, or skill sets you need to acquire. So again, it can be, you know, your existing business plan, especially when you're really early stage, because this can really serve as an internal document for you. It can be, here's all the things we've done, and here's all the sections and questions that we still need to fill out and answer. And then finally, what this really helps you do is figure out, you know, what resources do I have and what resources do I need? And so if you've actually mapped all of this out, and this is a lot of work on a single slide, I'm not trying to diminish the level of work that this is to create and write something like this, then you can say, okay, here are the resources I need. Here's the type of financing that I need to get this off the ground. Here's the team I need to create. Maybe you have a section of, even here's advisors I'd love to have. Here are, you know, random, whatever the resource sort of plan that you need. Financing is just one of those types of resource. People are another really important type of resource. So this is really, hopefully an entire sort of memo to yourself to say, you know, here's where I am today and here's what I need going forward. So I know that I just said a lot, so I just want to take a minute in case there's any questions, or if anybody wants to sort of ask specific questions about their situation.
That was a really good overview, I think. And, you know, you hit on a lot of the things, especially sort of almost doing like a gap analysis, like here's what we've got, here's where we want to be, and sort of reverse engineering. What is it we need? Who is it that we need? It really helps everybody to gain some clarity about that. So I really think that was great.
Perfect.
I have two questions, if that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
One is specific to the creative arts competition. So I think a lot of our ideas are pretty early stage. What's the expectation that we'll have unit economics and financial projections for the competition?
We like to see that this sort of has had some due diligence and some consideration. We're looking for real viability, but you also don't have to hand us like a perfect comprehensive 10-year plan, anything like that. So if you use these sorts of workshops, we'll also make some other resources available. We'd like to see something at least preliminary. And in the second part of the competition, there's a lot of one-on-one mentorship with people. And when you apply, you can also indicate like, we need help with marketing, or we need help with our slide deck. We need help with a business plan. And ideally, you'll be matched with a mentor who will be able to help you through those sorts of things. So tell you what you're doing right, strengthen any muscles that need a little more attention. So having a basic idea and an understanding of how this all fits into place is really helpful. And there will also be more guidance and resources.
Got it. Okay, perfect. That's helpful. And my second question is for business plans in general. Carly, how often do you think we should be evolving and updating this document, especially if we're treating it as a master text?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. But I also want to just go back to your first question too, because I think a couple ideas for you. It sounds, have you even started to explore the idea of unit economics for your business?
No, not really.
Okay, cool.
So January on that.
Yeah, so Fuse in particular will be a great place. So, right, one way for, you're a traditional e-commerce business, right, at its heart. So I think the good part about that is that there's some existing tactics, whether it's, you know, putting up a landing page or testing some Instagram ads. I don't know if you have sandbox funding, but that could be a really good use for that type of funding, just to sort of to test some ads and figure out, for instance, you know, there's a unit economic, I don't know if you're familiar with it, called cost per click. So figuring out, you know, how many people are clicking on my ad, you know, what was the cost of that ad, and then dividing it by the number of clicks. And then that's just like a starting ground. But the other way, just because you are in a world that's pretty known, obviously, you know, you're trying to do something different, but you could definitely look also at other, you know, e-commerce or direct to consumer businesses when you're doing some market landscape, just to see if there's some comparables. You know, whether that's specific businesses or sort of expected averages, that stuff changes all the time. So you want to make sure that market research is reasonably up to date. Obviously, another new digital marketing channel. TikTok hasn't been around a lot, but there's definitely some interesting and creative ways for customer acquisition in that front. So those are two ideas. I think you'll have a ton, if that would be a goal of yours in Fuse. I think that you could easily get a bunch of help there doing that and testing just some digital ads. But the other thing is, there's definitely some comps, I'm sure, in the market that you could use as a placeholder for now. And then I think in terms of updating, I think it's a good question. So I think, is this a document that you might always want to have open and updating whenever, you're getting sort of an opportunity? Probably, but I don't know if that's realistic. So what I would say is, I think having it as like a calendar reminder, like once a month, or blocking it out for like 2 hours just to look at it, I think is a really good thing, not only because I'm sure at the stage of business you're at, you're going to have lots to sort of update, but I think, again, it's just a good document to help you reflect and also help you say, okay, here's all, right? These are basically, every single bullet point is something to figure out in your business. It's like open questions. And so if you can sort of just even use this as a reminder to say, hey, here's the 10 sort of open questions I need to continue to figure out how to, understand. Oh, I've spent a lot of time this month on, prototyping my website and, doing customer interviews, but I forgot to like try that digital ad thing. It'll just help you sort of, I think, stay grounded and be able to see the big picture so you're not really missing anything in the near term. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. And for you, this is going to be, I would also say the use for you in this is eventually when you do find a teammate, whether that's a co-founder or just a teammate, it doesn't have to be a co-founder necessarily. This is a great way to get them on your page and help them understand what you've already done. And this slide was just, I think I sort of demonstrated that in the prior slide, but, in my opinion, your business plan should really be all encompassing. So there might be sections that I didn't include that you might say, I want to talk about X or Y. And so feel free to add it and, and to iterate it based on that general template. And then I do want to sort of plug this, this is the framework that we use at the Trust Center, Discipline Entrepreneurship. So if you want a framework to figure out how to answer all those questions, Discipline Entrepreneurship is absolutely a great one to leverage. So the graphic you're seeing on the left hand of the screen is the 24-step framework. If you're not familiar with Discipline Entrepreneurship, I would, number one, say it's an incredibly easy read. It's not a traditional business text. It really is not intimidating. You can read it in a weekend. I'm not a person who loves to read a book in a weekend, but I can easily read Discipline Entrepreneurship in a weekend. And it really does take you step by step, and you'll realize once you're going through these that it becomes much easier to answer those questions. And, these are sort of the bullet points on this slide are the high level points that I think this framework is really, really useful to help you answer. And by the way, in the right order, right? Want to understand who your customer is before designing the product for that customer, for instance. Once you understand the customer and the product, then the question is, how is my customer going to find this product? How am I going to make money? What are the unit economics? And then eventually, how do I actually scale this for impact? Getting to that, back to that vision. And so really the last slide I have again is the benefit of doing all this work, because I know that a business plan can be a tremendous amount of writing and a tremendous amount of work. But it'll make a lot of things easier, right? It's sort of doing the legwork to help you be more efficient in the long run, frankly. And so communication, again, is one of those things that, it can take you a ton of time to explain to an investor what's going on in your business, or a new hire that you just met that you're super excited about and you want to email immediately. So hopefully it's obvious to see the value of just putting some real thought into this business plan memo and taking some time to really build it out so that you can react really, really quick to people who you want to communicate to questions that are asked of you. I think about it as like a cheat sheet for my business. So that is all I have for you guys. I hope that was helpful, and happy to stick around for questions. But I will also say we have a ton of resources on our website, entrepreneurship.mit.edu, and Orbit, which has a huge knowledge base. So if you want more resources in the meantime, that's a great place to go to.
Thank you so much. This was great. It was so straightforward and well conceived. I think this will be really helpful. I mean, does anybody else have questions? I have a few things that came up, but Sita, do you have any questions?
I have a question for Carly that's not specific to business plan. So maybe
Yeah, go for it.
You want to go first?
Go for it. Go for it.
Okay. So Carly, you mentioned that Crab Walk is
Yeah.
not a venture-backed startup. So curious to get your thoughts on what are the considerations that we should take into mind when deciding whether to go down the VC financing path or not? And how does that affect the day-to-day operations? I feel like I have a hunch, but would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. I think one that's probably not asked enough, especially around a campus like MIT, where venture, frankly, VCs are all over campus. And second, it's fun to talk about, right? It feels like a huge milestone to raise a big amount of money. And so the first thing I will say about that is, I think that's the wrong attitude. I think instead of saying congratulations when somebody raises a round, it should be good luck. Because basically what you're signing up for, to start answering your question, is, you're signing up to return a lot more in capital than you took, right? Venture is an asset class where they don't want just 2 times their money back. They want like 10x or 100x their money. So, first of all, you have to be ready to be on their timeline. Typically what they want you to do is return their money. So that level of return in 5 to 7 years, or sometimes now more like 7 to 10 years timeline. So if you want to have a hyper growth, scale for impact business, and that scale for impact is a big deal, right? That's why people do want to take venture money and they do want to become founders a lot of time, because they want to have that impact. And you really do. I mean, capital is your way to get there, right? To have money to grow your business to a scale where, not only are the returns great for you and the investors, but the impact of your business is great for your customers and society, depending on what the business is. So the first thing I would say is you have to be ready to be on that timeline and that hyper growth mentality. And so, if you don't have those fundamental questions answered in the business plan, for instance, you're probably, you may or may not be ready to be on that growth path. And then I think the second thing is, so personally to me, my business partner just wasn't interested. We both came from venture-backed startups. She's actually a full-time career coach in her sort of day job when mine is at MIT. And she kind of said, I'm really burnt out on that type of business building. Maybe we'll do that one day, but it's actually not something I'm interested in right now. So she sort of made the decision for us. And I was supportive of that, just given sort of the whole picture of our lives right now. We didn't decide to sort of do that 100%. And so the second part of that on the other side is, do you think your business can return that, right? When you figure out those unit economics and you figure out that business model, like, is your business going to have a venture-backed return? Because there's a lot of startups that simply aren't, and that's totally fine. But you should sort of have an idea, not in detail, but high level, like, how would I even go about returning that money? And are the economics of my business ever going to get to a point where, I could be having $100 million in revenue, every month, monthly recurring revenue or annual recurring revenue? And if the answer is no, then that's totally fine. An e-commerce business, direct to consumer, that's a business model that has, a lot of times, not all the time, but has proven that can return, because you don't have heavy assets of a brick and mortar store, right? That's what you're sort of trying to disrupt. But those businesses, there's some really big successes, and then sometimes, there's other challenges like logistics and that sort of stuff. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. Yeah, no, I really appreciate the perspective. And I agree. Definitely not something we talk about much. And I wish there was more conversation around it. If you're at that point where you're not quite a venture backable business, we're not a $100 business, say, but you don't quite have enough funding to continue going forth, like, what are the different financing options available at that point?
Yeah. So the best source of financing always is revenue from customers. So that's why focusing on the customer is early is so important to us, because to have that option, even, there's some great stories from business, and I'd be happy to send you one or two that I have in my mind of, companies bootstrapping until they're like $10 million in monthly revenues. And then them saying like, okay, I need, if I want to get past this, I really need some venture capital. And right, the whole idea of venture capital is that you're trading ownership in your company for money. And so if you can get to a crazy milestone, like I'm not saying that's easy, but like if you actually have the capacity to raise revenue from your customers or get, in the medical community or the deep science community, like the NIH or other different grant opportunities, that is equity-free money. MIT, there is a lot of equity-free money, not in the millions, but in the tens of thousands for sure. If not 100,000, if you were to win, the 100K competition. The further you can go before taking venture money, the more of your company you'll be able to own. So if you do have that really crazy return on the other end, you can really profit from it as opposed to just your investors.
Got it.
Yeah, all you have to do is win this competition. That's the easiest path.
Honestly, it's easier than going through that whole headache of trying to raise venture and being stuck with them. This is a little bit of pain for a short amount of time. That's a lot different type of pain for a lot longer.
That's right. I've heard a few kind of stories like you can't divorce anyone who invests in your business, and so it's like the only relationship you can't get out of.
Yeah.
One thing that I think is interesting is writing a business plan is often like kind of a clarifying, sometimes kind of transformative process for ideas. Do you have any examples of like a good kind of before and after of an idea with going through that business plan process?
That's a good question. I don't have one that comes to mind, but I think a common thing that happens is people are not specific enough, like with their customer in particular, or the way they want to go to market. So, even saying like, oh, we're a consumer business, we're going to go and do digital advertising. Like I hear that from students all the time. And I'm like, great. Like, tell me more about that, digital advertising. What's the cost of customer acquisition? What is, the cost per click of your ad? What does that funnel look like? And so I think that the transformation that typically happens is you think you have a level of specificity that's enough, but in reality, when you actually go to write it out or go to try to communicate to somebody that sort of is in a position to give you real feedback, it's not nearly specific enough. So I think it really helps you narrow in.
I think that's really good advice, especially since we have such a heavy mentorship component in this competition. And if people want to take the most advantage, maximize their time with people, having greater specificity to then get sort of feedback on that is a lot better than taking someone's time as they walk you through that process. Wherever you are, it's great. If you need help finding that specificity, we're here. But if you have the capacity for that ahead of time, you can really maximize the mentorship opportunities.
Yeah. And I would just add to that, I think that's totally right, Shannon. And, people, especially mentors, they want to like brainstorm with you, right? They want to like actually help you. And they can't help you if you're just if the whole conversation's about just getting you to explain what you're doing. If you actually present them with like, I tested this, A versus B, and this is what happened, then they're going to be like, oh, that's such a great test. And, oh, tell me what you learned. And here's here's 5 other ideas of other things you can test, as opposed to you just starting to say like, oh, I'm going to have a digital marketing. I saw the industry averages, $15, cost per click. And it's like, okay, great. That doesn't really tell me anything specific. It doesn't give me an idea of your thought process as an entrepreneur or executor. It's just, you've done some basic market research and have some basic assumptions, but, to really go the extra mile and hopefully your business plan can sort of reveal when you need to do that, will really help you have much more productive conversations and utilize the resources of this competition and the other resources around MIT a little bit better.
So in that same vein, what happens if you change your mind? What happens if you need to evolve your idea? What happens if you're not growing or if you sort of miscalculated your risks? Like, how do you change your existing infrastructure, especially in response to either failure or constructive criticism from a mentor or whatever it might be?
Yeah, so that obviously gets more difficult over time, but it's never too late. I will use the big tech story of last week to give everybody an example. So Slack, which just sold to Salesforce for $26 billion, was a video game application. And I think, I don't know the number off the top of my head of venture capital that they burned, but they were a full-fledged company. And by the way, Stuart Butterfield, who's the CEO, this was his second rodeo. So it's not like he wasn't experienced as an entrepreneur and an executor. He had built Flickr before, which I believe was a different pivot. I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember Flickr, which was a photo app that sold to Yahoo. It was one of the original photo apps. And he made a second pivot with Slack. It was literally a video game app. Slack was a chat, I think an internal messaging tool that they used. And then they decided to get all their investors together, tell them, you know, he wasn't going to return their money. He was going to reinvest the money in this new business. And he hoped that they were on board. I can't remember if he gave people an opportunity to buy out or not at that point. And obviously that was a great success. That's extreme. I'm not saying that's your pivot, but you know, I think to try to answer your question more literally and more something that people can actually take away from it is, you know, the first thing is you need to sort of figure out, again, the specific things you want to change, and you need to be able to communicate that. So I think the most important thing, and what I'm sure, you know, Stuart did right, was that he was able to communicate exactly why what he was doing wasn't working anymore and where he was going. He had a new vision, he had a new mission statement, he had a new business plan. And so, you know, I'm sure what he was able to do is very effectively communicate that, not only to his investors, who he needed to, in theory, get on board, to his board members, who I'm sure had to approve the pivot, and then to his employees, who he was going to change the entire purpose of their job. And they were no longer working at a gaming company, which is certainly, I think, a specific type of culture of a startup, to, you know, an enterprise chat solution, which is a really different type of company to build. So, you know, I don't think anybody should ever be scared of pivoting. I think, you know, I get students who, you know, 4 or 5 months into their venture, they say, you know, this isn't working. And then they sort of just keep bumping against it, but they're too scared. And it's like, well, I already put this much time into my business. It's like, there's so much more time, hopefully, on the other side of this decision, right? So whatever, you know, I think one of the most frustrating parts about entrepreneurship is that it's not efficient. And like the sunken costs are something that's really hard for us to let go of. And I think that's actually one of the most important sort of muscles that you can build in early stage startups, is learning how to be okay with saying goodbye to your sunken costs, with saying goodbye to the time you just wasted trying a bunch of stuff that didn't work. And it's that analogy. I don't have a better analogy than this, but it's what people say when you have a baby, you forget all the pain, and you know, a minute after you see like your child's face for the first time, it's the same thing. Like I have students who, you know, they've made 10 pivots. I run Delta V in New York. We pivot all summer sometimes for teams. I had a team in 2018 called Rune. They started as a customer service app. They had natural language processing. And so they came into Delta V, they pitched me on this awesome idea I was super excited about, helping to train customer service agents a lot more fast and efficiently. And they pivoted for 2 months into the program and didn't land on their existing idea till like August 5th. Delta V is a 3-month program. It ends like August 30th. And, you know, that was really well worth it. They did such an amazing job. And 2.5 years later, they went through YC, they raised $2 million, and they're still in business in San Francisco. So even though, you know, they might have felt like they had at that point like 6 months of sunken costs, it was an unbelievable reflection on them as entrepreneurs to see that they were willing to pivot, you know. And this isn't the most comfortable environment. Like, they had board meetings they had to go to, they had mentors, they were telling what, you know, they did all summer, and they just stood there proudly and said, you know, we're pivoting. What can we say? We're not gonna nail it we're not going to do this until we're super excited about what we're doing. And it really paid off. And I have a lot of those stories too.
That is really, you got to have a little bit of maybe nerve to pivot late in the process like that. But I think that's a great point. And I think the Slack example is really poignant. This has been a great, you know, an hour is definitely not enough time. And there's so much to talk about with entrepreneurship. But if you have kind of one takeaway or one pearl of wisdom to share with folks who are looking to compete in this creative arts competition or entrepreneurship competitions more broadly, what would that kind of key takeaway or pearl of wisdom be?
Yeah, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it's really your ability to communicate is the most important thing. You can have the coolest idea in the world, the coolest product, but if you cannot communicate that to others and you can't get people excited about it or ultimately buy your product, it doesn't matter. Like, there's so many cool technologies that never got off the ground, or cool technologies that, you know, where the inventor didn't end up getting credit because they weren't the ones to commercialize it, right? Like the MP3 being like one of the best examples in history. And so, you know, not only should you focus on communication, and it shouldn't be a second thought, it really should be one of your primary focuses, just like, you know, technology and product development is for so many of us at MIT. You know, practicing communication is just the most important thing. And not only for this competition that I know, but really in the long run, and figuring out not only what you're going to say, but how you're going to deliver it, equally important.
I have a question.
Sure.
What would be your opinion? I mean, is there an important difference between art-focused businesses and other type of businesses, such as technology-focused ones? And the other question would be, what would be the key challenges for art projects, and how can we face them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first thing I will say is that I think creative arts businesses can be technology businesses. So they can be two different things, but they, you know, I think for the purpose, especially of this competition, they're, you know, one and the same, or they need to be combined. And then, you know, I think frankly, one of the challenges with this sector overall is that in a way, there's so much opportunity because there's been so many business models in arts that have been really challenged, you know, since the internet, really, right? When you think about music in particular. I mean, one of my first things I was thinking about when you answered that question is, you know, the size of the market sometimes isn't as big in arts as it is in other industries. But then I think about Spotify and the music market. And I was just listening to somebody talk about this, and I think it was Carlys Background, who I'm a huge fan of. She's a technology reporter. And she was talking about how in no other medium has there been such an elegant solution to have every single song in the world. Like, you can't have every TV show on a single app right now. You can't, you know, I guess you can sort of have every book, but with Audible and some other, I don't even know what the book apps are, but you know, Spotify was like such a feat, but it's difficult, right? And I think creative arts, like every other industry, is getting eaten by the really big tech giants. And so, right, everybody now is trying to play in music, Apple, Amazon, Google, and, you know, it's a really interesting time, I think, to be in creative arts. I think even now with COVID, right, and you see all the theater artists in particular having to completely rethink the entire way that they do things. You know, I think there's a lot of challenge in this sort of area and in this industry, and in a way that's kind of the most exciting thing for entrepreneurs to sort of see all the opportunity and try to wade through sort of all the mess that's happening right now. So hopefully it's a really exciting year in particular to really be innovating in the arts.
Thank you.
All right. I could probably talk to you for 16 more years about COVID innovation in the arts,
Yeah.
but that's not why we're here tonight. If anybody has any other questions, I would like to, you know, encourage that. And if not, you know, thank you so much, Carly. This was really fantastic. Great conversation, great presentation. I really appreciate your being here. And thank you to everybody else who came. Really great questions, very engaging. This was a delight.
Yeah, thank you guys. This was really fun, and thanks for all the great questions.